Happy Friday. It is a football Friday. I guess it's not the first football Friday because college was underway, but it's the first NFL football Friday. Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar, Nate Lundy with me. We are ready to go for the first weekend of the NFL season. The Denver Broncos will get underway in Seattle on Sunday. More about that as we go along. But of course, a very big game tomorrow when you're talking about the college standpoint. The Colorado Buffaloes 1-0 after a narrower than they would have liked win over North Dakota State. Now they get the big one, the rivalry game against Nebraska. The Buffaloes an underdog and probably should be, but this is game for the Buffs. Nate, when I look at the schedule breaking out for Colorado, if they're going to get to a bowl, unless they're really going to surprise somebody, they have to take this game.
They have to, and they're not going to. So they just need to be okay with that and move on. I'm sorry. This team is going to struggle because they can't stop the run. I sound like a damn broken record, but I'm tired of talking about it at this point. They can't stop the run. This is not about Travis Hunter. This is not about Shedeur Sanders. This is about the fact that they can't stop the run. And if you can't stop the run, you're going to be in trouble. Especially when they get to Big 12 play. And so I think they're hosed. I think the only way that they can get in this is if this turns into a track meet in Lincoln, and it's just everybody's scoring. I have a lot of faith in Shedeur. I have a lot of faith in Travis, especially on the offensive side of the ball, but I don't believe that their defense is good enough to win, period.
I think that's the concern. I mean, defense is a big part of this. As Nate pointed out, 157 rushing yards allowed against North Dakota State. Not exactly Nebraska when it comes to the ground game. Mm-hmm. And I understand that Nebraska, with their new quarterback, Dylan Raiola, it's a different scenario. Raiola, one of the top prospects in all of high school football, starts as a freshman for the Buffaloes, had an impressive performance in their opening win against UTEP. And for the Buffaloes, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, he noticed.
You attack weaknesses. I don't know if you attack inexperience. If that's a weakness, so be it. But the kid made some darn good throws, some pretty good plays. They did some consistent things that we knew they would do within their offense. Phenomenal game. I mean, it started out, back and forth a little bit, but they went ahead and did what they needed to do. But I love what he showed in his first college game ever. I love what he showed.
It's kind of been a funny week coming out of Boulder and Lincoln, in which you don't normally see this with Colorado, Nebraska a little bit, but it's just been a kind of a love fest with Deion Sanders praising Matt Rule and the Cornhuskers, vice versa. Rule talking about how he loves what Deion Sanders is doing up in Colorado, talks about how dangerous they are. These teams don't want to give any bulletin material board to the other, and maybe that's because, look, even though the Buffaloes skidded to a 4-8 finish, it's not as if the Cornhuskers are that much better. They went 5-7 last year. One of those losses to the Buffaloes. They're not exactly a juggernaut, even though they still have the reputation. And it seems like both of these programs are making sure they don't flex a little too much before Saturday.
Yeah, I think they're trying to make sure they don't do the flex. I think you're right about that. I think they're trying to avoid the bulletin board material. Both of these teams are trying to bounce back and get to the point of college football relevance again. Nebraska thinks they've done it with the quarterback that they've found, and that they have the ability to get back on track that, frankly, they haven't had since, in my opinion, since Tom Osborne. But they have struggled a little bit. Here's the other thing that I think we need to keep in mind. And maybe I'm looking at this a little bit backwards. Maybe I'm not. And so, feel free in the comments, in the chat, anything like that to disagree. I think Colorado fans see this as a rivalry. I don't think the Husker fans care. I really don't. I think that for Nebraska, the rivalry that was Colorado is not quite the same. I think the Buffs still feel it. But I think that part of that comes from, in my opinion, the fact that if you go back to, a couple of decades ago, that rivalry existed big time in Boulder, right? Mm-hmm. You with me so far? Okay. Sure. So it existed very big in Boulder. Okay. But if you think about Nebraska, they switched conferences a while ago, so they have had time to be able to, start. I think it takes a long time, but to start to be a Big Ten school and start to have some of those kinds of games mean more to them. But I think we need to also remember that back in the day when the Big 12 was what it was, and you get back to heck, we can go back to SWAC days.
Big Eight. If you, yeah.
Nebraska had the rivalry with Colorado, but Nebraska also had a rivalry with Oklahoma. Nebraska had more than one rival.
Yes.
Colorado didn't. Colorado's ta-da was the Huskers, right?
Yes,
and that's it.
That's 100% true.
And I bring this
exactly
up as
right.
I bring this up as an Oregon State grad because I have told you guys before, if you followed me for long enough, you understand that I hate the University of Oregon with every last cell and molecule in my body.
It really does.
I despise that university as an Oregon State grad. But guess what? Oregon got to the point where they were good. And so, yeah, it was a rivalry with the Civil War game, but Oregon got to the point where they had a rivalry going with the Huskies. They had the point where they got a rivalry going with USC because they were good. And a lot of times those matchups, for example, with USC, would help decide, Sean, who was going to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Right? Or who was going to the Pac-10/Pac-12 championship game. Colorado didn't have that. And so the disdain is focused, just like mine is, on one school.
Right.
Nebraska doesn't have that. And so I think that's why, I think Rule is a smart coach and he's not going to do any bulletin board material. But I also think mentally, this game doesn't carry the same weight for Nebraska as it does for Colorado, with one exception. And that is Nebraska looking for revenge.
Yes, Nebraska has actually lost the last 3 games in this series, including last year. And you're right, because look, Nebraska leads the all-time series with Colorado 49-21-2. So I mean,
I always love all the ties back in the day.
Very one-sided. But it goes back to, as you pointed out, a couple of decades ago, where in the 90s, especially, things really did heat up in the years when they were in the Big 8 and before they broke apart. Because in 6 different times, Colorado and Nebraska in the 90s met as top 10 teams in the country.
Yes.
And so that is how rivalries get born and still carry on. And the truth is, when CU smashed Nebraska 62-36 in 2001. Nebraska has actually never finished in the top 10 since. So is there a rivalry there? Yes. Is it Colorado's most important rivalry? Yes. Is it Nebraska's? No, it's not. And it used to be Nebraska-Oklahoma. Now, of course, that's blown to bits. But you're exactly right. I think for Nebraska's case, Nebraska looks at Colorado as a team they probably should beat. They'd like to beat, but they don't, gnash their teeth if they lose. And I know I'm going to get a little bit of flack for this. This is similar to the Rocky Mountain Showdown, in which the Buffaloes lead that all-time series 68-22-2. It's one-sided, but there was a chunk of time in the late 90s, early 2000s in which that was a really good rivalry back and forth. But it's really been one-sided, and that's why Colorado State looks at Colorado as their main rival, and Colorado really doesn't actually look at Colorado State that way. They look at Nebraska. So this is just kind of how it works in college football. But the rivalry itself, I don't think, is important for Nebraska in the way it is in Colorado. But even take it all aside, for both of these programs, it's an immensely important game. When the Nebraska moved to the Big Ten, it was the right move for them. Certainly the money makes it clear, but it's been a rough go for Nebraska ever since moving there. And given the NIL world, they have continued to start to fall behind a little bit at times because the reputation doesn't precede them the way it used to. So this is now oddly 2 programs that have each won national titles, that have really dug deep with their coaches and tried to create relevance, taking shortcuts back. And for both of them, it's worked. And that's why I think this game is fascinating, because there are some really top-end talents available.
Yeah, there are. And I think it is going to be a fascinating game. Don't get me wrong. I think it's going to be a good game. I do think Nebraska is going to win, and I think they're going to cover. But I'm just saying, if Colorado wants to try to build up a particular rivalry, it's going to take a long time.
Well, now you're in a new conference. You're going to have to.
Something's going to have to. It's going to take a long time. Right. Are you going to suddenly have a rivalry with Utah? Maybe. Can you find one with? I don't know. Texas Tech. Is it going to happen with the Jayhawks? Is it I don't know. But in my opinion, it's not going to be Nebraska. They're not in your conference anymore.
Right.
And so, Buffs fans, I understand the disdain. I mean, look, Oregon's not in with Oregon State anymore. I'm still going to hate them for the rest of my life.
Oh yeah.
So I understand from a Buffs perspective. I just think you have to recognize that it's not the same. It's just not the same, and it's not going to be what it was 2 decades ago. And hopefully Dion and company get the team to the point where there actually is someone that becomes a rival. But in order for that to happen, something that you referenced when you were talking about the rankings of the teams back in the mid 90s, the late 90s, early 90s, et cetera, one of the things that you need to be able to do, because I believe in professional sports, for example, rivalries are born from one of two things. It's either somebody in your division, right? Somebody that you play all the time. Okay. Or, and most importantly, it's born in the postseason. That is where rivalries come from. The rivalry that the Avs had with the Red Wings came from the postseason. The rivalry that I believe right now the Avs feel against the Minnesota Wild is born in the postseason. So I think that, it's going to happen when there are championship, and I'm using the air quotes because we're talking about bowl games and things like that, but when there are championship level things on the line, that is when you start to have a rivalry, and that's not Nebraska anymore.
No, it isn't. But it's still obviously an important game for the Buffs, because in his second season as coach, Deion Sanders really needs to get this team to a bowl game. They don't have to be phenomenal. They need to win 6. But to win 6, when you look at their schedule, they do need this one. Nebraska's 6.5-point favorite on the Saturday night primetime game. The first 3 games for the Buffaloes on the season, primetime national broadcast. The interest is still there. And this is for Colorado to continue to build. Ignore Nebraska because of the arguments you're making. Ignore it's Nebraska.
Yeah, ignore them.
You just need to start stacking W's.
Yes.
If you get 6 wins this year and get to a bowl, then a lot of the criticism starts to fade away, because you're going 2 years away from a 1-win team into a bowl. No matter how much the Sanders haters are out there, you have to look at that and say, hey, that's pretty respectable. So that's got to be the goal. And they have to put this away. The rushing defense has to be better. Quite frankly, the defensive backfield has to be better. They've got to find a way to pressure Raiola. And on the offensive side, the Buffaloes have to get ground game going, and they cannot give up on it. I understand the best weapons they have are Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and Jimmy Horn Jr. I get it. But if they can't run, the defense for the Buffs will eventually be worn out, and that's going to lead to favors for Nebraska at home late in this game.
Yep. Absolutely. So I know we're going to switch gears and talk about the preps here coming up, which also brings me to this reminder. When you're trying to make sure that you're keeping track of everything that is going on with the teams and with your favorite sports and everything here in Colorado, one of the smartest things you can do is make sure that you have the Mile High Sports and the Colorado Preps mobile apps. The reason for that is because then you're carrying everything around right here. Okay. So for example, you want to be able to keep up with what's happening with the Nuggets as we get closer and closer to the start of their training camp and the preseason and the rest of it. It's the Pickaxe and Roll podcast right here on the YouTube channel, as well as buried right there in the Mile High Sports app. As we get ready to find out when, because I believe it's when, not if, Gabe Landeskog is coming back, that is quite simply your Avs podcast that you can keep up with everything going on with Arif Dean. Add to that Rams coverage, CU coverage, and all of it, and you can carry it around in your pocket. And if you are the parent of a high school athlete like I am, a great way to be able to keep track of that is with the Colorado Preps mobile app, and in there you will find the scoreboard. So tonight, with all of these great high school games that are going on, you want to keep track of the scores. You want to know what's going on, not just for your son or daughter's team, but to be able to keep track of what's happening around the state and around the top-ranked teams. The scoreboard is right there. Everything inside the app for you, including the Colorado Preps weekly podcast that Kevin Schaefer does. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the preps or the pros, we have a mobile app for you that you can download absolutely free. You can search Mile High Sports in your app store. You can also search Colorado Preps. And hey, do me a favor, download them both. Do that today, and you'll be covered as we get through this high school sports fall season, as well as the start of the NFL, NBA, and NHL.
Well, we have an opportunity to look at Colorado Prep Sports, and who better to join us except Dan Mohrmann, and you've had a chance to hear Dan already. A great story up at milehighsports.com and Colorado Preps with the big football games tonight. Dan, obviously it is exciting. Football's upon us for high school, and they didn't wait on the scheduling. There's some monster games on the slate for tonight.
I know, and it feels a little unfair for you guys to bring me in right after you're talking about CU Nebraska, but I'm going to go ahead and power through for you because we have an awesome slate of games tonight. If we want to start at 5A, the defending champions are back in action. They're 1-0 after a big win against Thunder Ridge last week, but they're going to get tested tonight. They have a road game at Legend, and Legend is one of those big playmaking teams coming into this year. A lot of people think that Legend is a semifinal team. Andy Lowry lost a ton of seniors from last year's team, especially running back Josh Snyder, who was just so good in that state championship game. This is going to be the test for Columbine to see if they have a chance to repeat, or if they're going to have some work to do as we make the push into October and November.
Yeah, a little baseball Yogi Berra reference. It gets late early out here. I mean, that's the reality for some of these games. These are big ones if you're going to want to win the whole thing. Going down to 4A, you have a couple as well. And an interesting one, Montrose ranked 3rd overall, taking on Palisade. Palisade, a 3A team, stepping up in weight class. They're kind of playing everybody.
Oh, yeah. And those Western Slope teams, they love to play against each other. And Palisade started off their season last week with it was really a crazy win over defending 2A champion Delta. It was a lot of late scores, a lot of just overall some funky results that came out of that one for Palisade to go 1-0. They've had a down a year or two in the past. I talked to Montrose coach Brett Mertens after their win at Greeley West last week, and he's excited to play this because Joe Romuno, the coach up at Palisade, he runs that triple option offense, and it's a good chance for Montrose to really get disciplined defensively, make sure that they're lining up with their assignments, that they're doing the things they need to do to stop that kind of running attack. And then on the flip side, Montrose has been successful for the last 7 years because they do the easy thing and they just run the football. Sounds a little bit like what you were talking about. Maybe if the Buffs can run the football the way that Montrose does, it would be an easy win over the Huskers.
Yeah, it would be, and they can't, but we'll see how close that gets. And for another interesting one, of course, Rampart, ranked 8th, has had a really interesting start. They blew out Falcon 39-0. Then they had to win a 1-point game, 15-14, over Lewis Palmer. They're off to that 2-0 start. They've got 2 under their belt. The Ponderosa Mustangs, who you talked about last week, I'll wear it. My Ponderosa Mustangs, I'm a Ponderosa grad, looked to be pretty confident against Palmer Ridge coming into it. Still ranked 9th, which is pretty respectable, given the fact that they got obliterated 42-7. They were absolutely flattened. They have to get better. Senior Marcus Price had one of those nights to forget, a couple of interceptions, bad on the ground, get substituted out. Those things kind of happen. That's the nature of high school football. But they're really going to have to get a lot better in this game, and it doesn't get easier in the springs.
No, and the interesting thing about Rampart is Rampart's pretty much battle tested now with the way that they won that game against Lewis Palmer. A lot of teams are high on Lewis Palmer coming into this season. The Rams needed a blocked punt late, and they scored. They got the 2-point conversion, and they got the 1-point edge. The funny part about it, I was listening to that game on the radio as I was driving around to all my other games that I was checking out last week. When I got out of my car and turned off the radio, Lewis Palmer was winning the game, and Rampart had just given the ball back, and it didn't look good for the Rams, and they were able to pull that one out. Ponderosa is an interesting case because this is a team that really feels like it can compete in 4A, and head coach Jaron Cohen is really confident in that. Last week didn't go the way that they wanted, but when you look at what Palmer Ridge did to Doherty last night, they also won the game. I want to say it was 42-0 off the top of my head. I'll have to go check the Whataburger scoreboard for that one here in a minute, but we're going to find out what Ponderosa is made of tonight, because if they can bounce back, if they can get a good win over what is a good Rampart team who likes to run the ball, then maybe you can fix some of those mistakes that you saw last week and they can put themselves back in contention.
Yeah, it can look like a blip as long as the opponent continues to roll and you get a lot better. So we'll see. Let's go down another class. Big one, the top seeded Holy Family taking on Roosevelt in Class 3A. We're talking about a big-time matchup. This is a playoff-level matchup, but we get it already this week.
Yeah, these are the last 2 3A state champions. Holy Family, of course, took it last year, and Roosevelt took it the year before. These are 2 teams that, depending on who you talk to, these are either going to be semifinal teams or championship level teams. And they both come into the game 1-0. They both had really good wins last week. And, when I talk to Anilo, I try and get a gauge of how he's feeling. And it just sounds like he's got a little bit of bounce in his step when he talks about the Holy Family Tigers. So you can read his thoughts in our piece up at Mile High Sports. But I think this is going to be one of the best games, at least in this early 3-week stretch, right? If you divide the season up into really three periods, like John Fox used to do it in 4 quarters for the Broncos. But this is going to be one of those games that people are going to point back to later in the year and say, this is what we really evaluate this team on.
Yeah, you talk about the story up at Mile High Sports, trying to dive in a little bit more since we have a lot of locals here at Mile High Sports. Some comments from I contributed to the piece as well, and Elo's in that piece that you put together. We're bringing in some of the local spots there, and you talk about the Whataburger scoreboard. I think a lot of people who still maybe haven't been able to figure out or download the Colorado Preps app. By the way, driven by Ford, terrific partner there for this, and Whataburger on the scoreboard. This is really it. This, if you want all the scores for high school football as they happen, it is not an exaggeration to say the Colorado Preps app is your only real option because nobody covers it like Colorado Preps does.
I make it a morning habit after every round of football games to check our scoreboard versus Max Preps. And I'm not trying to dog Max Preps in any way, shape, or form, but we do a fantastic job of hustling and tracking down those scores. I was up until 10:30, 11 o'clock last night, trying to make sure I could get them all in, and I'll be doing the same thing tonight. Big ups to Whataburger. Their partnership has been really, really valuable in that. And I know I sound biased when I say this, Sean, but I deal with the scoreboard in more ways than a lot of people. The easiest way for me to look at it is right there on the Colorado Preps app.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So you can keep in touch with all of that as the season goes along. In this early going, has there been anything that's really stood out to you as something of a surprise? Is there somebody we should be paying attention to that maybe wasn't in the early preseason rankings?
One team, it's actually, you got to go down in classification, and it's Forge Christian down in 1A. I was actually talking to Mike O'Dwyer, who's the lineman head coach. They were down in Colorado Springs Christian School last week, and I swung by and watched a little bit of that game. And beforehand, I was talking to Mike, and he just looked at me and said, Forge looks good, and they look big. And they went, I think, from unranked to the top 5 after their win a week ago. So that's a team that I've got my eye on. As odd as it sounds, Lyman is another one. Mike likes to tell me every year that his team does not look good. We can't do it again. We can't repeat. And then the Saturday after Thanksgiving, I'm always asking him, so what happened between week 1 and now that you were able to repeat as state champion? So I want to see what Lyman's all about. Ray's got a really good team at 1A, but Forge Christian is one that people should be paying attention to.
The latest Mile High Sports magazine, you can see that. You can see those behind me and the ones over my head, and you can see one right there with Bo Nix on the cover over Dan's. Great story in there. Dan's contributed quite a few. One of those about in our football issue about some of those high school sports and where the maybe the most regular champion in Colorado ends up residing, and it might not be where you think when you're talking about some of these smaller schools. But now in these first couple of weeks, for people who are accustomed to thinking about the pros, right, or college football, down in high school football, there's a lot more variability from week to week. If you were trying to explain that to someone who's maybe getting into prep sports and wants to get into prep football, and it's really hard to find who the powerhouses are, who to follow, just the nature of the sport is vastly different from week to week because of the ages, the experiences. When you were to say summarize high school football today in Colorado to someone who really hadn't watched it, how would you kind of give it a comparison?
You're always going to have your traditional powers. I would compare it more to like the college landscape and say that your Cherry Creek is probably like your Alabama. Your Columbine might be your Georgia, a team that's on the rise and is always kind of right there. But the way that I would describe it is actually some of the best games and some of the best overall viewing experiences come away from the metro area. I think some of the most enjoyable games I've watched have been in places like Buena Vista, like Basalt, La Junta, Lamar, the southeast corner. So you have so much diversity in the sport. And what I always say about high school athletics that for me is the reason why I love sticking to it over, trying to navigate my way more into the pro or college landscape is that there are so many great stories that you find everywhere. Football and really all sports. And the one thing the one shameless plug I'll throw out is for people who want to read about it on coloradopreps.com, we were able to catch up with Austin Berry, a kid from Fossil Ridge, who went out and shot 59 on the golf course this week. And we chased him down, and we believe, I'm not gonna definitively say it is, but we believe it is the first 59 by a high school golfer in state history, and we were able to track that story down. So props to John Yunt, friend of mine at Holy Family, who helped me out. But that's the kind of stuff that we love doing at Colorado Preps.
59, that's like a half decent front nine for me, let alone the entire round. Yeah, they're really, and that's just one of the things that I think is so exciting about it. When you go to coloradopreps.com, you can really kind of sense that as well, because we talk about in college how only a small percentage of collegiate players are going to go to the pros. Only a small percentage of high school players really even play in college, especially at what we used to call D1, now FBS. So a lot of these guys, this is love of the game stuff. This is learning how to be a good teammate, learning how to be a better young person, learning all of those sort of skills that will bring them into the parts of their lives that don't have anything to do with sports. And yet at the same time, there's a lot of intensity, there's a lot of fun, and there's really a lot of love. And I think when you talk about high school football, especially on these great Friday nights, I think that the love of the game, as corny as that sounds, really does kind of shine through.
And you see it with the kids, with the kids' faces. One game I was watching last night, and we can shout out Doug Ottewell on this. His North Glen Norsemen were taking on Prairie View last night. It was an overtime game. Prairie View wins it at the end. It's an early season game. They're either 1-1 or 0-2, whatever it is. But when that ball falls in overtime, or it was intercepted by Prairie View in overtime, that sideline erupted with the kind of passion that you see when, if CU were to win the Big 12. Like, it was that level of celebration. And you just get that so much on a weekly basis. You get the chance to really put kids up and talk about the great things that they do. And that's one part of this job that I've really fallen in love with. And I just can't imagine myself doing anything different.
He is Dan Mohrmann, the editor-in-chief of coloradopreps.com. Make sure you check out everything he's putting together over there. Also, the topics on Mile High Sports, a great story about the big high school matchups that we went over a little bit in this segment. And download that free Colorado Preps app. Get all of that in your pocket, the live scoreboard and everything else. High school sports now is a perfect time to jump on into the world of prep sports, because it is on the rise in Colorado. It's been that way for a while, and now it really seems to be breaking through. So Dan is the man to follow, and coloradopreps.com is the place to be. Appreciate it. I know today is probably your busiest day of the week, so thanks for carving out some time for us.
You bet. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thanks so much. Dan Mohrmann joining us from coloradopreps.com. Like I said, download that free Colorado Preps app driven by Ford and get all the latest on tonight's games, all those big top 10 matchups. You'll get them right there on the app. I want to remind you, by the way, if you're self-employed and you're having trouble getting a home loan, that happens. It's hard, right? When you don't have another company besides your own to kind of lean against the bank. Well, you need to reach out to SCL Mortgage. They've helped thousands of self-employed people refinance their mortgage or buy a house with just their bank statement loan. No tax returns needed. SCL understands all the challenges of being self-employed. Find SCL at myspecialmortgage.com or call 303-790-2222. That's 303-790-2222. SCL has been serving Colorado successfully for more than 23 years. So please call them today or visit them at myspecialmortgage.com. If you're self-employed, this is where you need to go. NMLS number 1200716. Nate, we turn our attention to the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. The Broncos will go to Seattle on Sunday for their opening game of the season. They're obviously underdogs. You've talked about how tough it is to play there. You've talked about the challenges of being a rookie playing there. He'll be the first quarterback to start week one for the Broncos since John Elway in '83. And Elway lined up a one play under guard. So I don't expect that from Knicks, but is there a path for the Broncos to pull off an upset?
Sure. I mean,
Spoken with such confidence.
You want to get creative? Sure, there's a way. I mean,
I'm a positive guy on a Friday.
I'm sorry. They're just it's weird, man. I mean, look, I can find a way for anybody. I mean, I can find a way for New England to beat the Bengals on Sunday too, if I really want to dig deep into it. I mean, hell, the NFL's playing in Brazil tonight, for crying out loud. Weird stuff can happen. All right. Do I think that they can pull off an upset? Yes. I think for that to happen, this defense needs to be unbelievably opportunistic. They need to find something they weren't thinking they were going to find, first and foremost. All right. So they need to get a takeaway. They need something to bounce their way. They need to win a turnover battle. And I'm not quite sure that there are enough playmakers involved on this offense, or excuse me, on this defense to be able to do that. With that in mind, They can. There are a couple of folks in there that can be opportunistic, that can pull off a strip sack of Geno Smith or something like that. But I'm not positive that can actually be the case without something really, truly odd happening in the game. Do I think it can be close? Yes. I think that's why the spread is what it is. So could they pull off an upset, Sean? Of course they could. But the path to that, I think, is very difficult on the road.
Well, Nate, let me give you a couple reasons why that's possible. And Troy Renck from the Denver Post will join us in just a little bit to talk about it as well. But last year, you mentioned it earlier in the week, Seattle was terrible against the run. 31st in the league in rushing defense against. The Broncos obviously want to be a run-first team. There's excitement about Bo Nixon. There should be. At the same time, that's really what we're looking at here when we're talking about this game. You want to run with Williams and McLaughlin and Estime, and Seattle has done their best to shore up their defense, and it looks like they've added some talent. But at the same time, you don't jump from, say, 31st in the league to top 10 in 1 year.
No, not at all. You don't. And you, not without doing some pretty substantial things in free agency, without doing some pretty substantial things within the draft. So yeah, you can make some jumps. But I don't think you're going to see an exponential type leap. I think that's very difficult to do in the NFL unless, like I said, unless you just absolutely knock it out of the park with a draft pick, which, for example, I think the Broncos did when they drafted Pat Surtain. So it's not impossible, but it is very difficult to do if you don't have enough free agents and enough dollars to be able to spend to be able to make that kind of an impact with some huge names to be able to help you. So you're right. It is very difficult to make that kind of a jump. I do think they're going to be a little better than people think. I know we've talked about that a little bit. So I do think they're going to be better than people think, but I don't think that they suddenly have, become world beaters.
Well, yeah, and I get that. But there are a couple of things that Seattle, you look from last year, 31st in rushing defense, 30th in total defense, 30th in third down percentage allowed. So the Broncos, hopefully, if they can keep things, look, you want to keep the trains running on time in this game, right? And the running game is going to be a major part of this. The Broncos, when you're talking about the passing game, it's a lot of question marks. And it's not just Knicks. Cortland Sutton, I think, is reliable as a target. But when you look at Sutton's history, especially in the last couple of years, he is not, let's say, DK Metcalf. He's not a game-breaking receiver anymore. The 10 touchdowns last year notwithstanding. When you look around the rest of the receiving core, we've talked about it earlier this week. Interesting, promising, although, I think what you've seen from Josh Reynolds is probably what you get from Josh Reynolds at this point in his career. He's a reliable number 2, kind of number 3 receiver for the Broncos. He'll be 2. But they're going to need somebody to step, whether it's Vele, whether it's Mims, whether it's Troy Franklin, who's really had a slow start to his career. Somebody on the outside is going to have to step up because, as you pointed out yesterday, don't expect any help from the tight ends.
No, I don't think you're going to have any. And in fact, I was kind of disappointed when I was checking out the some of the NFL news over the course of today prior to us doing the show. Frankly, I was kind of disappointed to see that the Steelers have signed Pat Freiermuth to an extension because he was actually one of the tight ends that I had my eye on that was going to be a free agent after this season. That if the Broncos didn't manage to find somebody, I was like, I'd take Freiermuth here. But obviously that's not going to happen. He just signed a new 4-year contract with the Steelers, so he's not going anywhere. So it is one of those things that I go, well, okay, so it's not quite, an easy plug and play when we get to next year, and it's certainly not on the roster right now. So you're right. There are some glaring holes with this team, things that we've talked about. But there are some ways to be able to do it. Like you talk about where Seattle sits in terms of, their offensive ability last year and some of the struggles that they had last year with their rush defense or with allowing third down conversions. Can you get yourself into third and makeable? Third and attainable? Can you avoid things like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, and be more like 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4? Then I think you're going up against a defense that, look, we don't have the no-fly zone in Denver anymore, but they also don't have the Legion of Boom. So, I mean, both of these teams do not have the defenses that they had, 8 years ago, and so therefore you can exploit them. But remember, Seattle can exploit the Broncos defense as well. Right. I know Pete Carroll is not there anymore. I know it's a much more defensive-minded coach than what was there before, but that can also mean them trying to put Bo Nix into the 3rd and long type of situations instead of the 3rd and short. And so if you can be opportunistic, if you can take advantage of some 3rd and short, or you can convert on some of those 3rd downs, if you can try to wear down that Seattle defense a little bit, make them tired, give them too many minutes out on the field, longer possessions, drain them as much as you can, yeah, you've got an opportunity to do it. The other thing you have to be able to do, and I know that this is something we talked about on the show yesterday. You have got to put Geno Smith on his butt. You just have to. Seattle did a pretty good job last year. Geno Smith was sacked 31 times. That's pretty low in the grand scheme of things within the NFL. An average of, basically less than 2 a game. Can the Broncos actually get to him and get, let's say, 3 sacks, which I think they can. If that can happen, again, you're putting them into poorly manageable situations in 2nd down and in 3rd down and forcing their hand to a certain extent. I know that DK Metcalf is out there, but if you look at some of the advanced analytics, for example, Tyler Lockett started to fall off a bit last year. Right. They're going to be looking for him to bounce back, or they're going to be in trouble because they're not going to have the same kind of number 2 receiver that they've had for a while. Yeah,
and when I talk about the there's a flip side to all of this. When we talk about the idea that Seattle and where they ranked it, they were 30th in defensive yards allowed per game. The Broncos are 29th. And it's not where you can look at the season and say it was just that disastrous loss to the Miami Dolphins, because it really wasn't. Yards per play, the Broncos were 30th. Points per game allowed, they were 27th. Rushing per game, they were only 1 spot better than the Seahawks. They were 30th. The Seahawks were 31st. The Broncos do look like they've shored up their defensive line. I like the defensive line. I like the potential run defense improvement for the Broncos. But the passing part of it is still concerning. The Broncos were in the bottom 10 in the league, near the top end of that, but 22nd in passing yards against. Riley Moss is going to come into this game and probably start opposite of Pat Surtain. He hasn't had a lot of NFL experience. You don't know what you're going to get there. And again, you have Lockett and you have Metcalf. And then you have their younger receiver in Smith and Jigba, who's going to be a factor as well. So can the Broncos handle all this with their corners? Are their safeties good enough as well? Dealt with injuries. Brandon Jones really didn't play in the preseason at all because he ended up getting hurt. So I have a lot of question marks. It's not that they couldn't do it. It's that we really didn't get a chance to see it. And the defensive backfield, as great as Pat Surtain is, as great as Justin Simmons was, they let Simmons go. He's in Atlanta. It's hard to look at the Broncos defensive backfield and say it's clearly better than last year's. In fact, I think it's impossible. It is not better than last year's. Can it grow into it? I have a lot of that depends on Moss.
Yeah, a lot of it does depend on Moss, and that's a decent roll of the dice, right? I mean, we really don't know what to expect. So you put all this together, and I've said before, I don't believe they're going to win this game. I know there are people that are optimistic, not the least of which is our own Cody Rourke. I understand that there are a lot of people that are optimistic. I don't see a rookie quarterback going into Lumen Field and winning his first game ever in the NFL. If he does, holy crap, y'all, stay away from the tracks, because the hype train is going to run you over. That's going to happen if he wins this game on Sunday. Get ready.
Yeah, obviously it's a tough place to win. And when you look back at players who have won there in the past, it's bad. You've shown the stats. There's no pattern to it. You don't look at it and say, oh, it's a superstar guy, that's why they did well. That's not really how it works. So it is going to be very, very tough. But the Broncos have to try to find a way to pull this off if they're going to try to not even get to playoffs, Nate, but match the 8 wins they had last year. Certainly get over the Vegas over-under of 5.5. Now, that's a big jump when you're talking about 5.5 and trying to jump to 8. That's an awful lot, but we'll see how they can do it. But again, when you look at the wins on the schedule, 9 road games, when you look at the ones that they'll be favored in, what they're favored in at this point, 2 games?
2 games.
2 games. That's not great. And this isn't one of them, obviously. You're going to have to find a place to steal it somewhere. And maybe the option for the Broncos to exploit it is ball control. Keep the ball on the ground.
Clock.
Keep this scoring relatively low. You don't want to get in, unlike the Buffaloes and the Huskers. Buffs would love to get in a track meet.
That's the only way they've got a chance.
Well, if they get in a track meet, they're in trouble. They're going to have to keep this low scoring. Those scores, the under's 41.5. I would go as far to say the Broncos probably can't win it if those points go over.
Correct. I think
gotta stay low.
It's got to stay low. It's got to stay close. It's got to be one of those things with 5, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes left to go in the game that they are still in the conversation or still within a score. I know the talent is a lot higher, but I think the Broncos would be happy if they were in the position that Baltimore was in last night, up against the Chiefs, and trying to make sure that it was close enough to make things interesting down the stretch. And that is what Denver's going to be trying to do against a team that was, 5-3 at home last year, has a very good home crowd. And again, we talk about how intriguing this game is and how important this opening game is for the Broncos because of a new quarterback and all of those kinds of things. Let's also remember that Seattle's got a brand new head coach.
Yep.
It's not Pete Carroll on the sideline anymore. And that's a big deal.
That could play to Denver's advantage, obviously.
It could, but it also could be something. Maybe these guys are happy to have like a new coach and a new vibe. And that is something that Seattle can also play off of.
Yeah, we've seen recently, in fact, twice with the Raiders, as a matter of fact, when Rick Bisaccia took over, the Raiders all of a sudden got on a roll. When Antonio Pierce took over, the Raiders got on a roll again. You have seen it, and obviously there can be new excitement. And remember, it's tough. Jake Plummer talked about some of this to ESPN. Remember his first start, 4 interceptions. Plummer told ESPN, I threw the wrong hot routes. You learn in about 10 seconds. Some days in the NFL, you're going to do it right, and people are going to heap praise on you. And other days, you're not going to be able to do blank.
Yes.
And that's the reality of it. But I think there is a window for the Broncos to pull off this upset, Nate. And we'll have a chance to talk about that with Troy Renck of the Never Post in just a moment.
Yep. We'll get a chance to be able to yap with him. I want to get, can I get a little plug in here?
Please.
I want to get, everybody's in this Buffs mode right now. And so I want to get a plug in.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Look at this guy with his shirt,
Hey.
Oh yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. Me, I just got, a picture of a beer because that's about all I need.
We're both on brand.
But let me remind you about our friends at Number 38. This is our official home with Mile High Sports for all of our watch parties when it comes to the Buffs this season. Home or away, we are there. We are watching the game with you and with all of our fellow Buffs fans that are going to be rooting for them against the Huskers. So you got kickoff tomorrow at 5:30. I want you to come join us at Number 38 in Rhino because it is our spot to be able to watch. We got a live pregame podcast that we do. We're also live postgame with our postcast with our friends at Locked On as well. You get out there and you get a chance to join us. If you have not been there before, then you are missing out. The best patio that you're going to find in Rhino, great food, great drinks, and this watch party brought to you by our friends at High Noon, which means they've got the $38 High Noon buckets. They've also got plenty of other local spirits, local beers on tap. If you're like me and you enjoy the local craft beers, they've got them there for you. And the beauty is, like, every time you go in, you're going to find something different because they've got these great relationships with the distributors to make sure they're bringing in some of the best beers in town. Folks like Call to Arms and Colorado Native and all of that. So I want you to come down, join us at Number 38. Game starts at 5:30. I'm going to tell you, based on what happened last Thursday with the game against the Bison, get there a little early, okay? Aim for like 4:30. Make sure you get there early. You're going to be able to kick back with your friends, have a spot to be able to watch the game. The TVs are there. The big screen is out on the patio. And, of course, we'll be there at Mile High Sports, which means, free stuff. That's right. We got giveaways for you as well. So come down, join us, Number 38. Their website is NMBR 38, the digits 38, nmbr38.com. And you're going to see on there, just click on the Buffs. You're going to see everything they've got going, the specials you can do. And we want you to come down and join us because this is going to be a big game. We had a great crowd for the Bison. I'm expecting that to be threefold minimum for tomorrow for this game against the Huskers. So come join us at Number 38 in Rhino. We'll see you there.
What a big football weekend. Of course, you got the Buffs and the Huskers going. And then on Sunday, the Broncos will kick it off against the Seahawks. We'll talk more about that with our Denver Broncos insider, Denver Post writer Troy Renck, in a moment. Delighted on a football Friday to be joined by our next guest, the Mile High Sports Broncos insider. Of course, you know him from the Denver Post and the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. It is Troy Renck. Thanks for joining us, Troy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
This obviously is a big opener for the Broncos. It feels that they've been sort of stuck in the wilderness for years now, most of a decade, and it feels as if this team has a direction. A perfect preseason. We know that doesn't mean all that much. Doesn't happen very often either. What were your initial takeaways from what we saw in the preseason and how you think it will affect Sunday's game?
Well, I was most impressed with the fact that Bo Nix showed poise, maturity, accuracy, and he was on spot, on time. and Sean Payton bent the offense to his strengths, Sean. I mean, that is a big part of this. Last year, there wasn't a lot of elasticity between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's strength obviously was playing off script. Sean Payton wants a quarterback that can run the playbook and get the ball out on time. And that's what we saw. We saw a lot more of what I saw from Bo Nix on Saturday, I was seeing on Sundays. And so that's encouraging. Defensively, they should be better against the run with the addition of John Franklin Myers, Malcolm Roach. We'll get some of those double teams away from, DJ Jones and Zach Allen. But I'll be honest, I have real concerns about their secondary. Brandon Jones, the safety, didn't play in preseason, didn't practice much. And Riley Moss, they're going to be breaking in a brand new corner opposite of Pat Surtain. So could get a little greasy defensively on that back end, but I'm encouraged that they have a plan, they have a direction, they have their coach, they have their quarterback, and the owner, GM. Everyone finally seems to be on the same page, which we cannot say about much of the last 4 or 5 years around here. So it feels like they're in the right direction. And I like the Broncos to surprise some people this year. I just really don't like them in this game this Sunday.
And it is a situation right now where the AFC is almost historically stacked, especially at the quarterback position, and that makes things difficult. But let's go back to that defense, because I think with all the hype around Nix, it's getting overshadowed because some of those concerns that you just explained are very, very real. One of the things the Broncos are also trying to do is continue to bring pressure on the quarterback in waves. There are multiple players they expect to be able to step up. Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper, who led the team last year in sacks, Nick Bonito, who was only a half sack behind Cooper, despite playing in many, many fewer snaps. So now you add Jonah Ellis to the mix. And of course, Franklin Myers is in there, and Zach Allen has had sacks as well. But it feels at the same time as if the Broncos are expecting all of these guys simultaneously to pop. And historically, that's just not the way it works.
Yeah, I mean, when you start saying we're going to be good because 6, 7, 8 guys are going to have career years, I mean, again, that's one of those hope is not a strategy. That's not realistic,
Troy.
Yeah,
it doesn't work like that.
When I covered the Rockies for 15 years, and they were like, if Cargo and Tulo play 162 games together, we're going to be great. I'm like, that's true, but they don't, and they won't. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. And 6, 7 guys on defense to have careers is not realistic. Now, could they have a breakout guy as an edge rusher with Jonah Ellis or a Baron Browning? Absolutely. One guy could break out, and Cooper's a nice player. He's not built to be your sack leader, if that makes sense. He's more of a guy who can protect the edge and be there and run support and get his sacks. But they need that guy on 3rd and 8. Man, that guy's got a chance to get to the quarterback. The Max Crosby is what they had with Von Miller when Bradley Chubb was healthy. Can that be a Jonah Ellis? Can that be Browning? They haven't had a 10-sack guy, Sean, since 2018, that's when Chubb and Von Miller did it. So to sit here and say they're all going to break through, that's not going to happen because of either effectiveness or whatever. The other thing is, if you want to be aggressive and get to the quarterback, you got to be better against the run. And that's one thing they've challenged themselves to be more aggressive, attacking, better tackling at the point of attack. Because if you're not good against the run, and even during their 5-game win streak last year, people don't realize they were still giving up 125, 130 yards on the ground. When you're not good against the run, teams are typically in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. You're not getting sacks because those are bubble screens. Those are quick slants. Where you get sacks in the NFL is in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, those 3rd and longs that a quarterback has to hang in there and wait for the route to develop. That's when you get sacks. That's when you get picks. So, again, a lot of it for me is tied to, in terms of their defense, is tied to their improvement against the run. If they don't improve against the run, and they were basically last or dead last most of the season, then they're not going to get a bunch of sacks. It just doesn't work that way.
One of the other things that makes sure that the defense is holding the offense to those longer downs is discipline. We saw it last night in the season opener, an awful lot of penalties, not entirely surprising in the opening game. But in Baltimore's case, they can probably look back at some of their penalties and say without it, they might have beaten the champion Chiefs last night. For the Broncos under Peyton, they appear to be more disciplined this year. Is that something you're seeing as well on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball?
I mean, they're coached that way. Like, a lot of times when you see a team do stupid stuff consistently, like either you're coaching it or you're allowing it. Sean Payton's doing neither. I mean, he emphasizes, he stops practice. There's consequences for guys who make repeated mistakes. I mean, he's holding them accountable. Sometimes you just have players that aren't very good, and they get into the moment and the pressure gets to them. But for the most part, this is a well-coached team. And I think, it's one of their better coaching staffs they've had around here since Super Bowl 50. But how does that translate on game day? Because the secret and the threading of the needle for Sean Payton is the fact aggressive team, a physical team. So it's like basically want to play to the whistle and maybe sometimes a little beyond that, but do it with discipline. And so how do you do that? It's just like be incredibly aggressive, but know where that stop sign is. And sometimes that's hard for guys in the heat of the moment. So we'll see how it manifests itself. I'm more curious to how it manifests itself defensively, because they have really taken on this attack mindset. We're going to get after everything and be aggressive. And I love that. But with that sometimes comes late hits and comes after whistle plays. And sometimes that's the price of doing business. I like Malik Jackson, the year they won the Super Bowl, he'd get a personal foul. It felt like every game here to leave. But they were so good they could overcome it. That's the problem with a team like the Broncos. If they start to get penalized a lot, they're not good enough to overcome it, especially offensively. When you're talking about holds and false starts, the one thing they have to eliminate are false starts and those pre-snap penalties. Holding is going to happen in this league. Nobody's ever going to be perfect in that regard, and sometimes it just depends on the officiating crew. But the pre-snap penalties with a rookie quarterback, they need to keep those at a minimum, because Bo Nix starting drives 1st and 15, 2nd and 15, not good for him, not good for their offense.
Let's go to that line, because Garrett Bowles will be starting his 100th career game with the Broncos. I think when you give that number out to Broncos fans, that feels like something pretty substantial, given the fact that ever since he got here, it's kind of felt like how long till the Broncos can upgrade the position. And the holds happen as you expect. The league de-emphasized it a couple years ago during the pandemic and never really brought it all back. That really helped Bowles. But the procedural stuff, Mike McGlinchey had issues with that all last season. Powers did as well. Now you have a new center in the offensive line as well. And the job is to protect Bo Nix and get the running game going. Do you think this line is up to it based on what you've seen thus far? Should we expect a leap forward? Or maybe with the loss of Lloyd Cushenberry, that maybe it's going to stay about the same or maybe even regress?
I think they're going to be really good running the football. Again, it may not be until week 4, 5, 6 that we start seeing that. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen right away. It could. Seattle was terrible against the run last year. But even with Cushenberry gone, his best trait was his communication for me. So they're going to miss some of that. But is Wattenberg stronger maybe? Is he a better physical blocker? Perhaps. I mean, that wasn't Lloyd's strength. It was more last year than the previous seasons. But they're built to run the ball, and the metrics will tell you, Sean, they should have been better running the ball. That it's just Javonte Williams, frankly, was just gassed. Once he got to the middle of the season after his rehab, when he came back too soon, not his fault, but he came back too soon. The last 10 games, he averaged 3.2 yards a carry. And if you look at the metrics, they'll tell you that a lot of that was on him. So I think he'll be better. He's lighter. He's got some of that burst back we saw as a rookie. I do believe they'll be good running the football with Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime. Passing the football, I don't know if they're going to be a lot better, but I will say this: the sack number is going to go way down. I mean, Russell got sacked like 100 times the last 2 years, 52, I believe, last year, if memory serves. And internally, Sean, they will tell you that of those 52, more than half were on Russell Wilson. Like, they specifically blame him. Now, every sack has a story, but a lot of those stories started and ended with him as the subject for Sean Payton. So I would expect that sack number to go way down. So, can Bo Nix be around 30 sacks? I think that's realistic based on the way they're going to run the offense and get the ball out. Will it all lead to points? Now, that's a different story. Now, again, that's kind of my issue with the Broncos offense. I like some of the things I'm seeing, but who are the playmakers going to be in the red zone? The only known playmaker is Cortland Sutton based on last year. Javonte's 3 touchdowns last year. Marvin Mims disappeared, was a ghost the last half of the season. Josh Reynolds is a 2 or a 3. Greg Dulcich, he just hasn't played in essentially a year. So is 1 or 2 of those guys going to pop in the red zone? Maybe, but I would expect the offensive line is going to be better than people anticipate. The sack number is going to go way down, just be the nature of the way they're going to run the passing game.
Yeah, there are only a few quarterbacks in the league last year that had an average time to throw of 3 seconds or more. Russell Wilson was second longest in the league. The only guy worse, now his teammate Justin Fields out in Pittsburgh. So we'll see how that works for them soon enough. But Nix is going to get that ball out faster. When you look at this particular game in this situation, Bo Nix has the most starts of any college quarterback. So you expect him to not be as rattled as most rookies, but he is a rookie. He's the first rookie quarterback to start week 1 for the Broncos since John Elway in '83. Realistically, what are you thinking Bo Nix will do on this game on Sunday?
I think two things can be true. He can play pretty well and create hope, and they can still lose. And I think you can be able to separate that. I would caution, I wrote this in my column in the Denver Post, that, it's about stats and trust. They trust Bo Nix. They really do. Now, again, some of that is a leap of faith because he's a rookie. But they trust him. But the stats will tell you, Sean, this is like one of the worst places for him to open his career. Rookie quarterbacks since this stadium opened, Lumen Field, it's 3 names ago, but Lumen Field in 2002, rookie quarterbacks are 4-14 there. They don't play well. And that list includes Jared Goff, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, and again, the guy that won most recently a couple years ago, Brock Purdy. And that's an example. His resume in college, very similar to Bo Nix, basically a 4-year starter, take care of the football, and when opportunities present itself, make a play. And he didn't turn the ball over. Now, again, no one's going to confuse the Broncos for the 49ers, though. Again, he's got Kittle, he's got McCaffrey. Just go down the list. They've got Debo, Brandon Ayuk. All 4 of those guys are better than anybody on the Broncos offense in terms of their skill players. So it's not apples to apples here. The other issue is NFL first-round quarterbacks starting for week 1 are now they're 0-7-1 in their last 8. Sam Darnold's the last to win an opener in 2018 against the Lions. So there's just a lot of numbers working against Nix to win the game. But could he go 15 for 25, 183, 1 touchdown, no turnovers? I could see that. And he has played in these environments. He played it at both in the SEC, Auburn, Alabama, picked any 3 or 4 games every year in the SEC, and certainly at UW at Oregon. But he went 0-3 against the Huskies. He played great in a couple of those games, and you still lose. So I think he can play well, create optimism, and going into that next week, which will feel like a must-win if Russell Wilson's able to do Willis Reed and limp out of the locker room and start. Because it looks like it's up to debate whether he's going to play this week and would he play next week. I hope he does, because that gives that game so much more juice if it's Russell Wilson or Bo Nix. But I expect Bo to be efficient and take care of the ball. I just don't know if they're going to have enough against a Seattle team with those weapons they have on the outside.
We're talking to Troy Renck from the Denver Post, the host of the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. And last one for you here. Let's say the Broncos lose a close game out there in Seattle. What are we talking about Monday that's positive?
I think we're talking about Bo Nix being efficient and the stage not looking too big, the moment not looking too big. Again, like Justin Herbert did his rookie year. He went 6-9, but there were several games you're like, man, this guy gets it. He's going to be a good quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be – we're not putting him in the Hall of Fame. Remember, John Elway went 1 for 8 for he completed 1 pass in his debut, and they lost. They beat Pittsburgh, but he got benched. So I just ask people to have perspective and context of where he's playing Bo Nix. But I think we'll be talking about Bo Nix. The moment wasn't too big for him, Sean. I think we'll be talking about seeing encouraging signs from the run game. And I also think that we're going to be seeing, man, we have some concerns about this secondary going again into week 2 of who are the playmakers going to be opposite Pat Surtain.
He is Troy Renck. Make sure you give him a follow on social media. Catch everything he puts together at the Denver Post. And make sure you subscribe and download the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck for more. Troy, always great to talk to you about this. We'll check back with you Monday after the game. You
got it, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks so much. Troy Renck, everybody from the Denver Post. I want to remind you, of course, that if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center. You expected that, of course, but did you expect a licensed childcare center, licensed spa, massage, Pilates, golf simulator, even more? It's all at the DAC. But what truly sets it apart is its vibrant community. The member-owned club is all about, well, as you'd expect, the members, which in this case could be you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, and fun for the entire family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life. So find more about it and join the DAC today. Visit Denver Athletic Club CC for all the details. The Broncos find themselves in a position on Sunday in which they are the underdogs. Not surprising when you've had the kind of years the Broncos have had. And when you look at the line, the Broncos now a 6-point underdog to the Seahawks that started at a 5-point underdog. And as the week's gone along, more things have come on to Seattle, and now it's up to that to 6. The over-under at 41.5 points of the Broncos on the money line to win outright, plus 220. This isn't a game that's one of those really one-sided lines, but the truth of the matter is for the NFL games, which are generally pretty close in one-score games, it's significant.
Yeah, anything that you can see that's over 4.5 starts to feel significant from a sports betting standpoint. So, because you're getting away even from that, 2.5, 3 points, 3.5 points that you deal with from a home field advantage type of thing. So, I think the fact that it's up at 6 is actually somewhat significant. We obviously, over the course of the season, we will see some double-digit spreads. You start to see that as you get into the season. We certainly saw it last year with the Panthers and some of the teams that were just really struggling, and for the Broncos for that matter. So yeah, I think we will see some spreads jump up. You don't see that necessarily as much within week 1. I've told you that I think Seattle will win. I will probably stay away from the spread. I think that's a somewhat accurate number. I could see this being a touchdown game. So if you're going to try to do anything with the spread or with the total, in my opinion, I would bounce them around a little bit. I might take Denver's number up in terms of what they're getting for points instead of 6, maybe bring it up to 10.5, something like that. Try to keep it within single digits. And then the total, I think, is pretty fascinating. I actually have not looked at what the forecast is in Seattle this weekend. I have no idea whether it's going to be typical rain, whether it's actually going to be sunny. I have no idea what it's going to be, but I try to play into some of those things. But again, it's a home crowd. It's loud. It's a defensive-minded coach. I think that, Vance Joseph has his work cut out for him from a defensive standpoint as well, because I think the Broncos want to try to give Bo Nix a little bit of a break and the offense a break as well. So we'll see what the, overall game winds up playing. But in this particular case, as is the case for me for a lot, Sean, when it comes to betting, I'm not I'm not one that does a lot of spreads or totals in the NFL.
Well, and especially in
the odds makers are good, man.
Yeah, and especially in that first week, right? We're still in the feeling out process. By the way, the weather at game time is supposed to be 70 and partly cloudy. But you look at the spreads.
That's a damn day in Cancun for Seattle.
Right. And when the spreads, you look at that 6-point spread, only 2 games have larger spreads. The Buffaloes are 6.5-point favorites. Yep. Buffalo Bills over the Cardinals. And the Bengals have the biggest spread, 7.5-point favorites at home over the Patriots. So it's pretty big. The odds makers don't feel good about the Broncos in this one.
No, not at all. But
they feel like you.
Yeah, they do. And I think there's a reason for that. So, but let me get into some of the bets that I do like, and I'm leaning into player props and things like that. Let me start off with this one for you. I actually found this at plus odds, and I'm going against the grain on this one, folks. I say Bo Nix is not going to throw an interception on Sunday, and I'm going to take those plus odds at plus 114 at Caesars. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I think he's a smart player. 2, I think Sean Payton will keep him out of trouble. And the third one, and the most important one for me, is Seattle only had 11 interceptions last season total. That's it. In 17 games of the regular season, they only forced 11 interceptions. This is a team that has a decent defense, not great. They have their moments, but they are not ball hawks. They're not guys that take the ball away. And so even with the change at coach into a more defensive minded, I think Bo Nix is going to be smart enough to throw the ball away, send it into the third row of the stands if he has to, and avoid the interception. And you can give that one to me at plus odds. Now, there are several prognosticators out there that completely disagree with me on that one. But I'm going to stick with it. I'll take the plus odds, and I think he manages to keep things clean. But now I want to go from Seattle's defense to Denver's defense. I really like this bet, y'all, and I like it because of the odds I'm getting right now at a plus 165, and that is for Jonathan Cooper to put Geno Smith on his butt at least once. Now, the reason you see that 0.25 is because what we're saying is Cooper can have a half a sack and still get a payday here. So if he shares the sack of Geno Smith with somebody, Geno was sacked 31 times last year, which is not the same, for example, as what we saw out of Tommy DeVito and Daniel Jones and those guys that were sacked.
Russell Wilson.
The Giants as a team were sacked 85 times last
Yikes.
year. Okay. So almost 3 times what Seattle was. But I do think that Vance Joseph will try to be opportunistic. And if you take Jonathan Cooper, who led the team last year in sacks with 8.5, and put him up against Seattle, I believe that Cooper can get to him. So I like this one at a plus 165. I think that's a decent payday for us to be able to see. If you go and look at some of the other odds, for example, TJ Watt to have a full sack. So he's over points. He's at like minus 120. Ooh. You get into some of the bigger names, you're going to see a lot bigger numbers than that. So the fact that we can get Jonathan Cooper where he is to just have a half a sack and get it at plus odds, I like that one. I like that one quite a bit. Is there anything, before I go to some of the other games on Sunday, Sean, is there anything else that you've already been looking at from a betting standpoint on Sunday?
I mean, I really do like that Cooper one. Obviously, you're talking about a guy that is in a spot where he's been leading the team in sacks, and you just need the half sack. So that's pretty exciting.
I like that.
The Knicks no interception, I think, is good too. I think he's going to play this one pretty close to the vest. So in particular with the Broncos, I really have been looking at the I've been looking at the over under, and I actually think this game is going to go under. I think you have a new coach in Seattle that is defensively minded. I think you have a Broncos offense that is obviously going to get a feel for it. So I like the under that 41.5, even though for NFL scorers purposes, that's actually pretty low.
Yeah,
but
really
I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game, and I don't think Seattle wants it to become one.
Yeah, I think it is a pretty low number. I think that's one of the reasons why I stay away from it. When you get down to about 40 or lower, it's touchy. That gets a little bit ugly for me. All right, let me go to the other part of the Sunday slate and to a game that I really like this particular player prop. I want to talk about James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. They are on the road. They're taking on Buffalo. They are the dogs, as Sean mentioned. Buffalo favored by 6.5, but this prop to me is way off. James Conner for rushing plus receiving yards. So we're combining the two together. This number, shop it around a little bit. This is at 64.5 at Bet Rivers, as you see on the screen. It's 65.5 at DraftKings, 65.5 at BetMGM. And it's actually at 70.5 over at FanDuel. So you can shop this one around. But to see this out of James Conner, if you look at Buffalo last season, gave up about 39.2 yards per game through the air to the running back position. So let's say that James Conner can do half of that on Sunday. That's 20, which means I only need him to find 45 yards on the ground. And I think that he can do that. And the offensive coordinator came out and not just talked about him being an important part of the offense, but this week he referred to James Conner as the bell cow for this team. Those are magic words, especially if you have James Conner in your fantasy league. So 64.5 to me feels way too low. I like this, frankly, at 65, 66, 60. I think he's going to get to 70 combined between the two. So at whatever book you like to use, if you can find this in the 60s, take it and take the over.
I like in that game there also, if you go over to BetMGM, they do a competitive one. You take the top two backs, James Cook, the back for Buffalo, and James Conner, of course, for the Cardinals. Cook, a heavy favorite to have more rushing yards at minus 165, but the Bills have notably not pointed out bell cow. They actually do have Davis backing him up as more of a power back. There may be more of a back of committee than people think in Buffalo. And of course, the lead rusher is probably going to be Josh Allen. Conner is a plus 125 to have more rushing yards than Cook. So in the battle of the Jameses, I like Conner in that one too for plus money.
I don't think it's that bad. The only concern I would have with that one, Sean, is just the idea that we do know that James Conner will do a lot of it through the air. Right. That's the only thing that would have me concerned about going specifically.
And the game script could go upside down real fast if the Bills get off to a fast start.
It absolutely could. So there's a few bets for you as we're talking some sports betting here for the NFL on Sunday. But oh yeah, we're going to Brazil. We're going to Brazil. So I've got this one for you, putting it up on the screen so that you can keep track of it. This is my Brazilian Bucks for tonight. This is my same game parlay. And so you'll see the first two legs are alt lines, folks. That means I'm staying away from the standard line and I'm actually stretching it out. And I built this one at DraftKings. So I am taking Green Bay to plus 7.5. They just need to keep this one within a touchdown. There's a lot of people that believe Jordan Love and company are actually going to win this game. So I feel pretty confident with the idea of Green Bay keeping it within a touchdown the same way that Baltimore was able to last night against the Chiefs. Then we're going to take the total down to 40.5. And then I'm going to play the over on that one. So I'm pulling it down by a full 6 points here. I do think we're going to see some scoring. I actually like the over on the standard line, but when I do SGP, folks, I always bring these numbers. If I like the under, I bring it up. If I like the over, I bring it down, and I buy myself some cushion just in case we get a little bit of some oddities taking place. And then let's take the stud A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. I need him to have 50 or more receiving yards. Put all three of those legs together that you see there on the screen, and that is our same game parlay. I know it's not a sexy payout at plus 104, but the thing that I will throw out there for you to keep in mind, there are some of the books that are offering you boosts on same game parlays for tonight, for tomorrow, for Sunday, for Monday Night Football as well. So you could take something simple like this that's only a plus 104, Sean, and you can actually get it up into, say, plus 135, 145, 155 if you decide you want to use one of those boosts.
Yeah, that's a nice one too. And I like in this game, it's a minus number, so I don't like going with touchdown scores when there's a minus number. So I'm okay if actually going a little bit. Throw out a little bit there. Go to the first touchdown score. And then I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley over at BetMGM plus 450. I think the Eagles are invested in getting Barkley to work. I think that's part of what they want to see. I think they'd like to ease things up on Jalen Hurts. I think when they get close, everyone's going to expect a tush push, something like that with Hurts scoring. I think they'd like to see Barkley get it. So I like the Eagles in this game, although I think it's going to be a great game. It wouldn't shock me if the Packers out and out won. So I love the part of the parlay, but I like Barkley to score the first touchdown.
Yep. If you want to get into another couple of legs that you can play with, by the way, in the same game parlay for tonight, couple other things that I like. I frankly think both of these teams are going to score 20 points. That's why I like the 40 and a half.
Yeah.
And so you can parlay that type of thing together where, you take the game total. Fine. That's if you want to do that, but you can also break it up and you can do things like, hey, take both teams over 19 and a half points. I just think we're going to see some scoring in Brazil. I think we're going to see some fireworks and a little carnival this evening. So that's what I've got in terms of tonight for football. But not so fast, my friend. Let's talk some baseball with you. I've got some Friday night bets for you as well. I gave this to you yesterday, you fools. I hope you listened to me. He's hot as hell. Take Kyle Schwarber again over on his 1.5 total bases. So 2 or more total bases for him. And yesterday it was plus 110. Today it's plus 145. It's even higher. And he's taking on some random dude for the Miami Marlins. Okay. So it's Edward Cabrera. It's not a random dude, but it's a guy that he's got a great history against. So I will absolutely take it when it comes to Schwarbs. Give me the over again for him on his total bags at plus 145. You can find that one at DraftKings. The Rockies are such substantial underdogs on the road against Milwaukee this evening that there's a different way that you can play it. And I've got 2 of them up here on the board for you. First and foremost, instead of taking Milwaukee on the money line, take Frankie Montas to have the W, to get the win, to register the win, and you get that at plus odds. So it's a little bit of a different way to play it. Yes, it's a little bit of a risk just in case the Rockies do put some runs up early or they manage to tie it and then lose it because of the bullpen, something like that. But when it comes to some of these teams having dominant performances and the potential of getting some runs early, and it's Ryan Feltner that'll be on the bump for the Rockies, sometimes the best way to do it is to grab the opposing pitcher and say they are going to register the win. That's plus 118 at Caesars. But my favorite way to be able to do it this evening is that same game parlay that you see on the screen. So give me Milwaukee on the money line. Give me Milwaukee to score at least 4 runs, and give me Willy Adames to have a hit. That's all I need. Adames for a hit, Milwaukee on the money line, Milwaukee to score at least 4, and that's going to take us up to plus 114 at DraftKings. And finally, my last baseball bet that I like for this evening, I'll take Mookie Betts, but specifically for a single at plus 105 for him to have a single 3 for 10 lifetime against the opposing pitcher tonight, whose name I'm forgetting right now for Cleveland. But 3 for 10 lifetime, and all 3 hits are singles. So again, if you try to take him for a hit, Sean, you're going to wind up being at like minus 230.
Yeah.
But if you specifically say he's going to have a 1-bagger, nice little shot to, left field, plus 105. I like that one over at DraftKings. Continue to pick on the Rockies, folks. I know it's baseball season. Brad on the Fade 5 podcast, Brad has given up on baseball. He's not paying any attention.
Oh, football started.
I cashed some serious tickets yesterday on baseball, so that is why I continue to do it. And so because of that, I'll throw you two quick ones that we don't have a
Matthew
graphic
Boyd
for.
on the bump, by the way, for the
Thank you,
for
Matthew
the
Boyd.
Guardians.
Two quick ones I want to throw out there for you. Bryce Harper at BetMGM and Jurickson Profar at BetMGM are both plus 550 to have a home run. I already told you that Philadelphia is on the road, but they're taking on Cabrera. And that should be a nice one for them. Then we're talking about Jurickson Profar at home. All right. Profar is going up against a kid that has made, I think, 4 starts. I'm trying to find his name so that I don't mess it up. He's made 4 starts. He has pitched 19 1/3 innings. Okay, 19 1/3. That's it. That's all he's done. It's Black is his last name, Mason Black. 19 1/3. In 19 1/3 innings, he's given up 5 home runs.
Yikes. How do you stay in the majors that way?
5.
That's bad.
Jurickson Profar, he might go yard more than once. But if you're going to give me plus 550 for that guy to hit a home run at home against a pitcher that barely has any experience in the majors this season and loves to give up the long ball, thank you very much.
I'll give you one more with the Rockies, obviously, that I think is the easy one. Easy. Just two leg same game parlay over at BetMGM. Even money, but it feels like almost stealing. The Brewers on the money line to beat the Rockies, as the Rockies are, bad. Yes. Frankie Montas with over 6.5 strikeouts. If the name Frankie Montas rings a bell, that's because the last time he was in Coors Field with the Reds, he hit the Rockies. And the Rockies in their last 2 games have struck out 16 times, not over the 2 games, in each game. These guys are wind turbines, okay? They can power Coors Field on their own with the way they're swinging and missing. So the idea of Frankie Montas tonight getting the strikeouts and the Brewers just winning for plus money, sign me up.
Last one for you for as we go into Sunday. Some of my favorite anytime touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid for the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
Arizona gave up 8 touchdowns last year to the tight end position. Take your pick in Indy and Houston, and I might even parlay both of these guys together. Jonathan Taylor on the Colts side, Joe Mixon on Houston's side. Mixon, by the way, plus 115 for an anytime touchdown. Jonathan Taylor is even money. Love me some Travis Etienne for a touchdown as well at plus 110. And then you want to go a little bit longer odds. I say Caleb Williams calls his own number for the Bears, plus 255 for him to score.
Bears are one of the teams really to keep an eye on. They will be fascinating. And if you're looking into getting into the sports betting world, we get it. Obviously, for the last 4 years, you've heard all the ads and you've seen them. Some of them are probably in your head. It feels like the guy from Breaking Bad's mad at me every time he talks on it. It's just stuck in my head now. So, it's been inundated with all these advertisements. And I understand that. But over at Mile High Sports, we've made it a lot easier for you because not everybody wants to get into sports betting in the same way. There's lots of different ways to do it, whether it's bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches. We've collected all of them, put them all in one place on Mile High Sports and on the app so you can get into sports betting in the way you'd like to. It's easy to do. Just go to Mile High Sports, click on Colorado Sports Betting, and then you can look over everything from all of the books, all of their matches, all of their bets, all of the ways that you want to hop in. And by the way, it's not that you can't have multiple. Nate's talked about how many apps he has. I have multiples as well because you want to shop. So take advantage of all of those opportunities to maximize what you are doing when you step into the sports betting world. We make it easy. Don't worry about having to click around. Go to milehighsports.com, click on Colorado Sports Betting, and all of it will be laid out for you in the easiest possible way to take a look at. It's just that easy. Think of it as the bonus that we can give you from Mile High Sports. Nate, we go to the Broncos and the Seahawks, and obviously this is a much anticipated game. Most of the attention on Bo Nix making his NFL debut. He will be the first rookie quarterback to start game 1 since John Elway in 1983. So obviously this isn't something the Broncos do very often. And when you look at their history with rookie quarterbacks, it's not impressive because Brian Griese has the most starts of a Denver Bronco drafted quarterback. Remember, John Elway, of course, acquired in a trade from the Colts. Peyton Manning acquired in a trade from the Colts. So Andrew Luck retired before the Broncos could grab him, presumably. But Bo Nix now finds himself in a spot where the Broncos traditionally haven't done well with their rookie quarterbacks. Griese started 50 games, but beyond that, Jay Cutler, the only quarterback drafted higher, one spot higher than Nix, 11th overall, picked 37, and then it's Trevor Siemian with 24. And the amazing part is the only rookie quarterback that has ever been drafted by the Broncos and won a playoff game. Ever. Tim Tebow.
Yep.
That's it. So Bo Nix, in some ways, stepping in a franchise in which you have Elway and Manning's shadow still looming large. When it comes to drafted Denver Broncos, the bar is exceedingly low.
No, it's low. I think it's great. I think it's exactly what you want. I don't want a bunch of pressure on his shoulders. Can you imagine if let's change up the calendar here, folks. What if this draft pick had happened, 4 months or 2 months after Peyton Manning had retired? Now you're completely changing the pressure and the feel and the Broncos fans and their patience and all of that.
That pressure was so large on Brock Osweiler, he bailed.
Yes. Well, and he shouldn't have been the guy anyway.
Money from
so
Houston,
so think about the difference. Like, I know that it has sucked these last 7 years. I know it's been awful, and I 100% agree that it's been awful. But at the same time, is it that bad that there maybe has been a gap so that there isn't quite so much pressure on him? That seeing flashes of solid play is actually good enough?
Yeah,
I think it is. I mean, not that I wanted to go through the last 7 years of crap. Hell, I couldn't give away my season tickets. But I think it's actually incredibly beneficial that he doesn't have that much pressure on him.
The Broncos are the third youngest team in the NFL.
Good.
So, I mean, there's obviously the rebuild is on, whether the Broncos want to tell you that or not. So I think expectations for the game on Sunday probably need to be lowered a bit. I think Nix is going to play a clean game. I think he's smart. I don't think he'll be rattled per se. When we say rattled, right, you're talking about that more of an emotional type of thing. A guy looks panicked. I don't think Nix is that guy. But will he look confused by the looks that he gets? Mike McDonald, by the way, a first-year head coach, but look what he did with the Ravens last year as the defensive coordinator. They gave up the fewest points in the league with a variety of blitzes from all sorts of directions, and I expect to see that in this case. You will see a lot of heat coming towards the Broncos quarterback in a lot of different ways that will be well disguised, and for Nix, that's going to be difficult. So the Broncos in this game, I don't think are going to score many points, but Nate, I don't know if it's just misplaced optimism. Maybe it is, or the fact that I don't.
Oh, good God! Don't tell me you're going to do what I think
Seattle.
You're going to do.
I think the Broncos sneak away with a really close win, and like I said,
Holy
I like the
crap.
under 20-19, something like that. A defensive play comes up. Who knows? Pat Surtain, now the second highest cornerback paid in the league. Jalen Ramsey got his bag today.
Of course,
he will hop over that as I'm sure his agent, gave
what in
high
the
five to
what is
Surtain's.
happening, people?
I think they can surprise people. I don't think Seattle's all that good. That's part of it. I get it. We're talking about the crowd, but the crowd doesn't play. They play the Seattle Seahawks, and I think they have a chance. I think Sean Payton is a clever guy with a lot of experience. McDonald's in his first game. Payton's in the top 20 in regular season wins of all time. I think they find a way to steal this.
All right. Well, you keep
I'm swimming upstream. I get it.
Gas.
I'm swimming upstream.
By the way, this happens every year with the Broncos, by the way. We sit there and we try to be real for a while during training camp and during preseason and all of that.
Making the playoffs.
Well, no, we try to be real there for a little while, and then we wind up with these 2 weeks off, and all of a sudden everybody starts drinking the happy juice and buying into this crap. So you're taking them. You're taking the Broncos to win.
I think they will steal this one. It'll be close.
I
think they can steal this one.
I think you're absolutely nuts. Give me Seattle 24-17.
24-17. Well, that would still be a reasonable game for the Broncos if it's only down.
I told you I think they're going to make things close. I've been consistent about that ever since we were broadcasting live from training camp. I have said they're going to be close.
Is it the offense or actually is it the defense?
It's the defense.
That's where I am too. I understand.
And by the way, I have said I believe the front seven is actually going to be better than people think they are.
I do too.
I'm worried about the dudes behind him. As good as Pat Surtain is,
it
is really easy for Geno Smith to just not look his way.
Yep. It has been. And Riley Moss is likely to be the guy getting his start over there. And you would expect him to get picked on. You don't know what the Broncos safeties health has been a concern. Obviously, they've had to move on from Caden Stearns from health. PJ Locke's dealt with health issues. Obviously, Brandon Jones has dealt with some health issues there. That's the safety position really scares me. And I think you have a good slot corner in Jaquan McMillan. But then again, with McMillan, let's be fair. I've talked about this before. When you're good, it shows. I think McMillan can play in the NFL, but now after a year where everyone got to see him, are they going to find the gaps? And so there's a concern there. I just look at it and I don't think that Geno Smith is going to be the guy to pick them apart. But I am concerned about Kenneth Walker. I am concerned about the dump-offs. I want to see the Broncos be better against the rush. But I'm with you. I actually look at the defense of the Denver Broncos being more of a concern than the offense to me, simply because I understand that the offense has a ceiling. They're not going to be a top 10 offense no matter what happens this year. They might not even be in the top half. Despite the fact they had, and I know you're talking about the Kool-Aid, I get it. The Broncos had their 6th ever perfect preseason. 3 of those have come since 2017. Those all ended, the other ones ended in losing campaigns. The Broncos averaged 33 points per game in the preseason. That's the most in the NFL, but the preseason doesn't directly translate. So I get it. This is just a gut feel. There's not a lot of logic behind it. I just think that in the end, Sean Payton is going to get the best of Mike McDonald. That's really what it boils down to me, is I have 2 teams that I think are underwhelming for the most part. And so in that case, I look at the coaching differences, and I think that's where I look at this state game. I think this is Sean Payton's opportunity. It's his team now, right? I mean, most of the players on this roster, the vast majority, are guys that he's brought in. So it's his team. It's his quarterback. It's guys that are playing the way he wants them to play, look the way they want to look. They're all pulling on the same end of the rope. There's this, us against the world mentality that I think is healthy. This is the opportunity to show it. I think Sean Payton gets over on McDonald in this one, but it will be close.
All right. You want to do that? Yeah, go. I'm okay.
Okay.
I think you're nuts.
Not a lot of faith there, but
Geno Smith passed for at least 250 yards in 7 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got games from last year of 290, 334, 369, 326, and 328.
He's got receivers.
And by the way, 328 he did in week 2 against Detroit on the road.
Right. Well, on a football Friday,
I'm just saying, you don't want to poo-poo Geno Smith. You don't want to poo-poo the new coach. I'm just, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, it's a football Friday, and
I don't know.
It's probably time for us to hit the weekend before Nate talks me out of it, because if it goes much longer, he probably will. So we'll find out.
Precisely.
We'll catch all of you, by the way. Number 38. Down.
See you there tomorrow.
Go check that out tomorrow. Buffs and the Huskers. Great football weekend. Thanks to Troy Renck for joining us. Thanks to Dan Mohrmann for joining us with all of the great high school football happening. Top 10 matchups all over the state. It really is football season. Delighted to get a chance to break it down with you. Danny Bailey's the man that makes it all work. Appreciate everything that Danny does to make this show what it is. He's Nate Lundy. I'm Sean Drotar. Enjoy the football. Have a safe weekend, because we want you back here on Monday. This is Mile High Sports.